Good afternoon, buenas tardes, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual afternoon with Ambassador Sue Cobb to discuss The Lady of Silk and Steel, From Everest to Embassies, a fascinating account of a truly inspirational and indomitable woman, which leaves the reader wondering what's next. Ambassador Sue M. Cobb served as the United States Ambassador to Jamaica from 2001 to 2005 and is currently a principal of Cobb Partners, LLC, and president of the Cobb Family Foundation. She is a trustee of the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Council of American Ambassadors and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training. A graduate of Stanford University and the University of Miami School of Law, Ambassador Cobb is a skilled alpine skier and high-altitude climber who has scaled mountains worldwide and published The Edge of Everest, A Woman Challenges the Mountain, a chronicle of her travels across China and Tibet and her climb of Mount Everest. To moderate this afternoon's conversation, we're joined by former U.S. Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. A native of Cuba, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen served for almost 3 decades as a member of Congress representing diverse areas in South Florida. She was the chairwoman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa. She was the first Hispanic woman elected to Congress, as well as to the state of Florida House of Representatives and Senate. Throughout this afternoon's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of The Lady of Silk and Steel from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Hi, Ambassador Cobb.
Hello, Christina. So happy.
Hello.
There she is.
Hey, Sue. Hey, Christina.
Can I say a word before we get going on this, please, moderator?
Please do. Thank you.
First, thanks for everybody who could be on today to converse with Ileana and with me. And my big thanks to Christina Nosti and Books and Books and Mitch Kaplan and all the work they do. It's been a phenomenal ride since I have known Mitch for about 40 years, as I have Ileana, one of the great women of the United States. Almost 30 years in Congress, in charge of major committees, involved in intelligence and security and cybersecurity, everything you can think of. And before that, she was in the House in the state of Florida.
This is not about me, Sue. So zip it.
Well, I want you all to know, those who are here, she is a magnificent person. And okay, go ahead.
No. So, Sue, I am just so thrilled to have this opportunity, and I encourage all of our viewers to buy this book. Sue doesn't get even 1 cent. They're very involved with philanthropic organizations, and Sue, where do the proceeds for this book go to? Because I know they don't go to you. None of what you do goes to you. You're giving everything away.
Well, thank you. That would be true.
Well, thank you. So although I have many questions, and we're going to talk about all of your life chapters, there are many acts in your life. Start with Everest, because, oh my goodness, what made you go to Everest? What made you do this crazy adventure at a not a very tender age either? Tell us about.
Well, to me,
and what you said why you said yes.
50 was tender enough. I've always been on the athletic side and kept in good shape. And to tell you the truth, it was as big a surprise to me that this thing came along in my life as it was to many others. I had never thought about climbing Mount Everest. I had in fact done some climbing, but nothing that serious, but an occasion arose when I was asked if I'd like to go. And honestly, what intrigued me about it initially was that we were going to go into China. Remember now, this is 1988. This is a long time ago. So not many people besides Henry Kissinger had been to China. I was going to get to go across China and into Tibet, and talk about a place that was off the tourist reach at that time. It was Tibet. So I was very interested in that part of it. And what happened when you got to the mountain? I was just going to wait and see.
And you figured, and one of the another book that you wrote about the climbing, you think that the publisher was interested in your story because you were either going to be the first woman to reach the top, or you were going to die. Those were the two choices. And in fact, being in Everest is such an experience that you lost 30 pounds. You were oxygen deprived. You had difficulty speaking at one point, and later on, you found out from your teammates how close to death you really had become. But you said that there's an Everest in all of us. So what does Everest mean to you, and why do you say that everyone has an Everest?
Well, first of all, even though I personally had not thought about going to Everest to climb it, the mountain has, for many, many years, been the symbol of man's highest aspirations, of aiming high. And I always thought about Everest as a metaphor for life, which I'll get to tell you why I found that to be true. There are so many obstacles along the way. And then over time, after I'd done the climb, and yes, the climb was dramatic, and yes, at one point, one of the emergency doctors that we had at a lower elevation told me I had 4 hours to live. Well, he didn't tell me. He told somebody else, and I didn't find out until later. But I was pretty wrung out. We had been on the mountain for 8 weeks, over 22,000 feet. So it was really astounding. Everyone has an Everest, Ellie. I can tell you that for sure. It may not be a high mountain peak or a desert or ocean. It really is something internal to you that is a very difficult challenge. I saw it with some friends at different times, one of whom got cancer, and she viewed it as her Everest to get through that. Another of whom lost a family member. And it takes great strength to get through life itself. There are more obstacles in life than there are on Everest.
So well said. And you have so many beautiful passages in the book. One of the ones that I like is, I think back on the trip often. I can see myself standing on the North Ridge. I was alone on that narrow ridge somewhere between our 24,000 and 25,500 foot camp. Time was over. Sad I was to hear that. I stopped ascending and turned to look for the first time at the scenery below. Some of the highest mountains in the world were under my feet. As I looked down to my right, I could see into Tibet and China. To my left, Nepal and India. There were hundreds of snow-covered mountains below me. I was just a tiny speck in an immense universe. The immensity of infinity and the wonder of life. It was a transcendent experience. Wow. That moved me. Tell me about that feeling. And did you have it again? And have you had that again?
That's pretty hard to describe. First, I'd ask our friends who are watching to think about when they last went skiing at a major resort, the highest mountain that they could see in the United States, continental United States, would be 14,000 feet. And as I said in that passage, we got up, our team reached 25.5 before a vicious storm descended, we got word. We were able to get off the mountain. There were climbers on an adjacent ridge approaching the summit as we were. This is in the fall when the polar jet stream comes down, and that was the occasion. Our leaders said every climber on our team must get off the mountain. And of course we said, okay, we do it. We were so weak anyway. The Czechoslovakians on the next ridge, 4 of them, stayed for their next day's try at the summit. And the winds took out their tents and all of them died. So we made some good decisions. The awe-inspiring is really too hard to explain, but many climbers have transcendent experiences when they get into that environment.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about all parts of this book. And the Lady of Silk and Steel, we're going to talk about how you got that moniker. We talked now about Everest. And one of the things that I was struck with reading this wonderful book is that the development of Sue Cobb is really about the development and the expansion of women's roles in the United States and throughout the world, because you came from humble roots, a small ranch in Chino, California, 4th generation American Californian. And we're going to talk a lot about Chuck, because you can't talk about Sue Cobb without her partner in life, Chuck Cobb. And you see them in that beautiful portrait. Husband and wife duo, ambassadors, Chuck Cobb, ambassador, tapped by Bush 41, a wonderful old school gentleman to be to be ambassador of Iceland. And then you were tapped by Bush 43 to be ambassador to Jamaica. And then we're going to talk about your years with one of our greatest governors of Florida, Jeb Bush, and the roles that you had there as the head of the Department of State for Florida, head of the Florida Lottery. It's just what an incredible life. And Chuck's jobs at Commerce Department. And I mean, the Cobbs have been an incredible part of American life, but you really personify how women's roles changed, because you were very much a stay-at-home mom, taking care of your sons, and your love of family comes across so strong with Chris and Toby, the way you talk about them and the way you talk about your grandchildren. But tell us how your life really is an example of the expanding role of women in the United States, especially how you started and where you ended up, a member of the Federal Reserve. I mean, there's so many things to talk about.
That's why I wrote them down. I couldn't remember them all. Well, thank you, Ileana. It is true that because I have had good health, thankfully, I have lived quite a long time. I was born in 1937. And when you come forward or think back on those years in the 40s and the 50s, many of my friends, of course, would have experienced the 40s and the 50s, where women were, if they were fortunate, were able to go to college. But the goal in college, directed both by society and by our parents, was to meet a nice person, meet a nice man who could provide for your livelihood. And that was it. Then you were the homemaker and eventually the corporate wife and, these other things. I don't know why, but I think growing up on the ranch had a lot to do with independence and self-sufficiency. And some of those things just weren't fulfilling to me. So I just did other things. And thankfully, my husband let me get away with it all the time up through Everest. But in the course of time, and many of my friends, whether they're watching or not, would attest to the fact that women now are in every single type of professional life or not professional life, but they're doing things that enhance the community, enhance the state, enhance our country, and they're really intelligent and terrific human beings whose worth and value is now being recognized. Yes, I believed that to be true. And just the arc of my life covered that range. And, who knows what we have going in the future. Could be great.
I know.
Could be great.
Because just 2 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, Sue Cobb, or maybe last year, to celebrate her life, she took off with the Golden Knights, this parachute division at Homestead Air Reserve Base, and that's what you did. You jumped out of an airplane just a couple of years ago, right?
Well, yes, it was last year. It was early in the year before we all got locked down. And it wasn't any kind of celebration. This man called me and said, "Hey, we're doing some training flights, and would you like to go jump with us next week?" And I'm thinking, I've never done that before. And here I am, I'm 82, and I'm thinking, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Oh my gosh. I can think of so many things.
It's not good, but the odds, you have to always look at the odds. And this is one of the lessons of the book.
Yes, tell us about that.
Mentioned the parachute thing, because you really, the book is a story of a life. But if you see closely, it's always making choices. And that's what all of our listeners have to do all the time, is make choices. So to learn how to think through the pros and cons, and if you're doing something that's physically dangerous or even job-wise dangerous, you need to understand the probabilities. And that's not too hard to do. Analyze what's happened to others before you. And, just as an example, parachute jumping is actually very safe. But, people don't think of it that way, of course. But, that's what I encourage. Look at all the odds and then make your decision. And hopefully you have someone like my husband who will turn his head for a few minutes.
And speaking of your husband, I love the little anecdote about your first date, which did not go so well. Both of you were at Stanford, and I know how close you are to Stanford, and you got married at the Stanford Chapel, but it didn't work out correctly for you on that first date because Chuck was in charge of the festivities, this big time dance. And when he called to apologize that he didn't spend enough time on you, you said, "You know what? We don't have to do this again. Some things are just not meant to be. Don't bother calling again." And I'm glad he didn't take you up on that, because you've been married now, 62 years, and
Yes.
it is such a strong marriage and a strong family, and your love for family really comes out in this book, in spite of the fact that you're very independent, but incredible athlete. You grew up as an athlete, and you talk about your love for your brother, who was the first to go to Stanford. A tough life in the beginning. You didn't have the most supportive, perhaps, of parents. Not a normal Donna Reed kind of upbringing, but it taught you true grit, and you became this independent woman, championship athlete, an incredible skier, tennis player. Everything. I mean, there's just nothing that Sue Cobb would not take on. And then this moment when you have this beautiful life with your husband and your two sons in California, Chuck comes in and he says, "I've got this great employment opportunity." It's not just a job. I mean, it was a great job at Arvida, a construction company, humongous, except it's in Miami. And I love it. In the book, you said, "I'm keeping the kids. You go to Miami. I'm not moving." And yet we are so blessed, and we're so lucky and so fortunate here in South Florida that you came down here and you've made Miami your new home. Went to law school at 38 years old, University of Miami, go Canes. Graduated when you were 41 years old, went to work at Greenberg Traurig in their commercial litigation, and you started an entire department. What was it called? The
Public finance.
Public finance, yeah. And
Right.
and they tried to hang on to you as long as they could. And you're an avid runner. You run everywhere you go. And what an adventure. But I want to talk a little bit about Jeb 41 and 43, the Bushes. So already Chuck and you are both moving in heady circles. He gets a call after he's worked in the Commerce Department for Bush 41, and he taps him to become ambassador to Iceland. And then you get tapped by Bush 43 to become ambassador to Jamaica. And when do you start as ambassador to Jamaica? On September 11th. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to ask you about your role as a diplomat's wife when Chuck was ambassador, and your role as our ambassador to Jamaica when you started on September 11th. That's unbelievable.
Well, thank you. Now people don't have to read the book because you just summarized my whole life. Well, one thing that is kind of interesting, Chuck and I have a record of some sorts. It's not well known. I think we made it up, but we are the only non-career ambassadors to be married and living together while serving in a foreign country. Nobody else has that ever happened to. There have been ambassadors whose spouse died, and then the next person went on to be an ambassador, a handful. But yes, and that in and of itself could cause problems. I mean, really, could you live with Dexter every single day and tell him you were making all the decisions?
But the fact that you adapted to be a diplomat's wife, and then Chuck was a diplomat's spouse. It's just unbelievable. No matter what role you were thrust in, you both performed at such high levels.
Well,
story about being ambassador to Jamaica, and best story that Chuck had about being ambassador to Iceland.
Well, when our family goes on trips, we always come back and say, what was the best, what was the worst? The worst in that assignment was that my first day on the job as a United States ambassador in the embassy in Kingston was September 11th, 2001. And we all know everything changed then. I had actually studied pretty hard once I knew that I was going to be sent off to the Western Hemisphere. I studied hard, but really nothing mattered at that point. The only thing on anybody's mind was the terrorism and what had happened, rightly so. But it did change the trajectory of everything that I had thought I was going to be doing in Jamaica. So that was a little bit of a rough start, I would say. But I had a great State Department team. I had a number of people there, and particularly my deputy, who was truly excellent. So an ambassador who comes in from the outside has support, and that's important. The best thing is it's a little strange. First of all, the answer would be it's the people. The Jamaicans are fabulous. They are just terrific. They're smart and they're fun and they're as independent as they can possibly be. And we, the United States, have reasons to get upset with them for a lot of reasons in all the CARICOM countries. But the people are wonderful. I mean, I just had such a great time with them. But the most memorable thing to me, Ileana, the most memorable thing was I was sworn into the office as U.S. Ambassador on August 15th, 2001. The person doing the swearing in was then Secretary of State Colin Powell. You have the opportunity to invite like 300 of your best friends to come to this very ornate room and listen to somebody say nice things about you, which I did, of course. But when I walked in, just with my family coming over from a hotel, I was an ordinary citizen. When I came out, I represented this president and 330 million people. And I felt it. I felt it. I was a different person when I walked out of that building. That was pretty impactful to me. So, and all the things in between. I mean, it was such an honor.
Yeah. I want to interrupt you, although I know I asked a lot of questions and I'm not giving you time to answer, but I want to make sure that we get to why is this book called The Lady of Silk and Steel? Who gave you that title, and what did he mean by it?
Well, the person who gave me the title was the Prime Minister of Jamaica during my tenure there, and I hadn't been there all that long. But folks, I got to tell you, everybody pays attention to the U.S. ambassador. So I'd already had a lot of news coverage and meetings, and of course I'd met him, the foreign minister and the security minister, and so on and so forth. So they had a sense of the person that I was. And it probably started in the first press conference when they thought they might intimidate me. And one of my aides tried to take over the question, and I batted him down and answered the question precisely from the American point of view. In any event, at another large event, the prime minister was introducing me to about 300 or 400 people in the audience. And he said, now I want you to meet the Lady of Silk and Steel. So it was Prime Minister P.J. Patterson. And somehow, how would I know? He got that impression. He gave me that name. And, there were some parts of it I thought, well, maybe that's a little too harsh. Or on the other hand, when my grandkids get out of line, whoa, I'm going to use the steel part. So it was, and
take notes there about your kids and your grandkids, but I won't spill the beans. You got to buy the book and read it. Let me quickly chat about Jeb Bush, one of Florida's greatest governors, and he thought so highly of you. You were there as the head of Florida Department of State. You were there as the CEO of the Florida Lottery. None of these jobs did you envision that you were going to end up doing, but Jeb called you and tapped you to be it, and you did it. Tell us about what it was like for you, and what a critical role you ended up having in Bush v. Gore. In the presidential recount, you had already staffed up this great committee, Florida Lawyers for Bush, never knowing that they would come in so handy in that legal battle. Tell us a little bit about working for Jeb in these roles.
Well, over the years, because it was 41 who first appointed Chuck. And also, Chuck was in the last part of the Reagan administration. So George H.W. was vice president then. And, obviously they have social events in the city and blah, blah, blah. And we got to know George Sr. and Barbara. And Barbara was somebody I really greatly admired. So we had a kind of a family relationship there in a way. And then, of course, when we were down here in Florida and Jeb was running for governor on 2 different occasions, we were with George H.W. and Barbara the first time he ran, and George won in Texas and Jeb lost in Florida. That was a very emotional night. And then, of course, Jeb won. He's a phenomenal person. I like to ask my friends now, who maybe I know they're Republicans, and I don't want to get into any of that, but I ask them now, how would you feel if you had the choices that you had in, 2016? So yes, we've been friendly with them.
We all love, what a great family they have.
Yes, they do. And they demonstrate that. And that's to me, that's a great role model. They make sure
they live their faith. He always says, I have a public servant's heart.
Yes, yes.
That always came through with Jeb.
I'm not sure I do, but they were jobs that came up, so I just went to do them. There was a legal problem at the lottery, and I was an attorney, so he called me. But it was we figured that one out. And then Secretary of State was after I was ambassador, and he had a need because the person who was Secretary of State, very capable lady, you probably know, Glenda Hood.
Yes.
Jeb had another almost 2 years to go. I had just come home from Jamaica, and he's trying to figure out who can step in, late in the process and run his State Department. So he called me. First he called Chuck. This is the funny part. First he called Chuck and he said, "Do you think Sue would do this?" And Chuck said, "No, she won't. Don't bother calling her." So then he had his chief of staff call me, who I knew. And he said, "Would you consider doing this? It's not that long a period of time. Would you consider being Secretary of State?" I said, "Sure, no problem. Be up on Monday." It just worked.
Unbelievable. And another interesting part you discuss in your book that George W. Bush 43, he asked you to become an ambassador to another country, a big country. You don't tell us, you don't give us the details, so it's scintillating, but you thought about it and you turned that down. So you actually were offered another gig as an ambassador, and you said no because for you to take care of the Cobb foundations and the grandkids and
well, there were a number of factors to consider on that. I really wanted to do it. I really sincerely wanted to do it. Chuck was not very enthusiastic. My husband was not very enthusiastic. And my grandchildren were at an age, they were like, maybe, I forget exactly, but say 4 to 8 or something like that. So if I was gone for another 2 or 3 years, I was going to miss a lot of their formative life. And I stewed over that whole thing for a while. They actually asked me not to say anything because eventually obviously a career ambassador was sent to that post, but it was flattering, I guess I would say.
But you did every job so well. You accomplished everything that you needed to accomplish that they wanted you back for more. And no good punished. And I know that our time is limited. You talk a lot about family, as accomplished as you are as a professional woman and an adventurer and a globetrotter. You mentioned Toby and Chris, your 2 sons and your 7 grandkids a lot in the book. Tell us a little bit about what faith means, because it comes out in your book as a Christian, what family means to you. And then tell us a little bit about your philanthropic work at the University of Miami and many other foundations.
Well, I think most of us learn that as time goes by, some of us learn sooner rather than later. Family is really, really critical. And in fact, Mount Everest had an impact on me on that, because when I was gone for 3 months on that trip, and it was so hard, so arduous, and people call it scary. I wasn't scared because you have to focus when you're doing that. But to have no one there with you that you knew would at least offer a helping hand, because everybody's doing the same things, they're busy, and I didn't know most of the team very well. I really miss the fact that I didn't have my family there. But in that case, you really have to put it out of your mind. Then when I came back and my boys were close to getting married and producing these great kids, I had a strong lesson in pay attention. Of course, I had to my boys, but that was, I wish I'd had a girl, actually. I didn't. You did, but I didn't. But my 2 boys, my whole reason for being in good shape my entire life was so that I could do whatever they were doing. If they wanted to go diving, I was going diving. If they wanted to play football, I played football. If they wanted to play tennis, I played tennis. And so my goal was to be with them. And Chuck has always, he's had a similar approach to life. We didn't always have the time to be with the family and do other things. I remember when Chuck and I were dating that he was a pretty consistent attendee at the Stanford Memorial Church. And I grew up as a Christian Scientist. That's a whole different thing, which I write about a little bit in the book, but not to go into it here. But I didn't have the same need to go to church every Sunday. But I kind of wondered why he did. And because obviously, we're pretty close. And so gradually one comes to grips with what are the really important things in your life. All the frivolity aside. And,
that's true. And so many great excerpts in your book. What I love are the writings from your sons and from your grandkids. What they say about their mom and what they say about their grandma. And I know that you're a very humble and self-effacing person, but I've met, and I'm sure you have too, many important people who are a little bit estranged from their children or from their grandchildren. I mean, it happens that you can be a very successful person and be not a great family person. And you've managed to find that balance. And I think women everywhere, no matter if you're the grocery clerk or the vice president of the United States, really, you're trying to find what that balance is. And your life has been the search for that balance. And you've been, because God has given you so many wonderful attributes, you've been able to find that balance. So what's the secret? What's your philosophy of life? How have you been able to come from a tough environment, growing up in a little farm in Chino, California, to become the successful woman? How do you do it? Do you juggle all the balls in the air and some of them fall down sometimes?
Well, that's kind of a hard question because people's circumstances are different. I have great friends, husband and wife, everybody's doing a lot of stuff, but they're different than this and they make different choices. The one thing, two things that I want to say. First of all, I want to give a big up to Laura Tana, who was my editor on this book, because it was her idea to go out and interview a bunch of people, including my sons. Not the grandsons, they did their own thing, but to get the perspective of other people. And she said she did that because she couldn't believe all the things I was telling her. She went and checked them all out. But it does add something to the book, other people's views. The other thing is that one of the lessons that we've learned along the way, and I would venture to say you've learned this also, you can't be afraid of failure. The fear of failure is the biggest cause of failure. So you have to be prepared to take risks. You have to know that occasionally you're going to fall, maybe a lot you're going to fall, but you're making progress. You're growing. If you don't take risks, you're not going to grow. You're not going to love. You're not going to make progress in areas that you never thought about. But if you're willing to take risks, so then I ask myself, and people ask me, well, why do people fear failure? And I think it's because people are afraid, including most of us, that somebody else is going to think something bad about them. It's somebody else placing their thoughts in your mind without ever saying anything. So I decided to get over that. And if an interesting risk came along, I was prepared. The balance part, that you have to work out with your family.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for women everywhere. Now,
you and Dexter know that.
we know it. Yeah, we know it well. Now, you say that you and Chuck are foreign affairs nerds. You're very much a part of ambassadorial programs in DC, making sure that that folks have the proper training to do a good job representing our country overseas. You give awards to the best ambassador, or the one who's learned the most, or the one who's contributed the most. And I think that's wonderful. You're on the board of CSIS, a wonderful think tank in DC. You're very involved in the University of Miami. Tell us a little bit about the what you do in terms of foreign affairs still, and philanthropic foundations that you're involved with.
Okay, well, that's long and fairly boring, but I'll take a stab at each one. The CSIS and the other think tanks, Chuck was at Woodrow Wilson, and we have a handful each, and we study the problems of the world. I particularly Henry Kissinger was on my board at CSIS, and his kind of forward-looking, make all the blocks fit together. If you move a block, what happens in the geopolitical world? That's fascinating to me. So we study these things, what's happening in Myanmar or Sudan, which a lot of Americans are not too interested, but it helps us put the whole world together. And right now, America needs putting together. So I'm not gonna go into that, but we learn a lot from being with these learned people and people who are involved every day in foreign affairs and keeping America safe. You played a role in that yourself over the years. And certainly as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee for the House, you were deeply engaged in
No, you're not going to segue into me again. No, I love this. There's so many great lines. You're a wonderful writer, as is your co-author, Laura Tana. But some lines like this: the lessons of action are always stronger than the lessons of words. And you had a life full of action, and you've been all over the world, literally just everywhere, and you've done it with your kids and with your grandkids, and so what's next for Sue Cobb? Because last year you were parachuting out of an airplane. I don't even want to think about what's next. You've been scuba diver. You've been, from top of the mountains to the lowest part of the ocean. And everything in between. What's the next act for Sue Cobb?
Well, of course, that's a good question too. But the truth is, number one, I never, ever gave a thought to going to law school until I finished, the boys being old enough for me to do that. Tennis was over. I wasn't going to Wimbledon. And I wanted to get a job, but I only had a BA from Stanford, which wouldn't do very much for me. So I had to go to a professional school. Wanted to go to business school at UM. It wasn't quite right for me. So I thought, what the heck, I'll just do law. That's how I got into law. Then Everest came along. I had never once given a thought to Everest. I'm telling you, it was a shock to me, but it was good. That turned out fine. Being Secretary of State, being the ambassador, I never thought about those things as something I would plan. So right now, I will tell you, it's the next really exciting thing that comes along, or if not exciting, something to which I can add value, because I'm just not someone who spins my wheels. So I don't have a plan.
You were always in good shape, and Chuck was a tremendous athlete, but he was an Olympian. You were just perfect for one another. And I'm so glad that you went to Stanford and he went to Stanford, and you met there and you got married there, and you formed this incredible life, an American journey, and lived an exemplary life, because you're such a good person, and Chuck is such a good soul as well. So you've accomplished a lot. but you're just good people. And I hope that people get this book. It really is a page turner because Sue has had amazing experiences, and she talks about them quite openly and candidly. And I don't know if our time is coming to an end, because I know Christina wanted 15 minutes for questions and answers. So Christina, Sue and I, we can just keep rapping a long time.
I see that. I see that. Oh my God, what a fantastic conversation. But we do have a few questions.
I mean, what she's had so many lives.
I know.
Can Ileana help me with the questions?
So let's see. I will.
Is going to read them to you.
Yes. Yes. So here's a
And we do
question
nothing.
from Rocky Rodriguez. What advice
Rocky.
do you have for women thinking about starting a family and career?
Thinking about it, Rocky. Let's see. Thinking about it. Be sure you know who you are. Be sure you know who your spouse is. And if you're ready to start a family and or a career, try the family first and get the little kiddies started in the right direction. And then you have some leeway to go do other things. Learn all the time, read books, watch different shows that you have an interest in. Figure out who you are, and then you're prepared to undertake some of those more arduous tasks. Thanks, Rocky.
Okay, the next question. From Debbie Zimmerman, what are some of your favorite sayings, quotes, motivational maxims?
Well, all you have to do is buy the book. I'm not really selling the book, but at the beginning of each chapter, you will see one of my favorite things. And I know that I started the book, chapter 1, with a quote from Anais Nin. And that quote says, "Life shrinks and expands in proportion to one's courage." And that was part of what I was talking about in taking risks. I believe she's absolutely correct. Life shrinks and expands in proportion to one's courage. Another one of my favorites, just to give you two off the top of my head, but there, however many chapters are, that's somewhere. Many of my favorite quotes are there. There is no definition. This is by George H.W. Bush. There is no definition of a successful life without giving to others. Think about that. There is no definition of a successful life without giving to others.
And the Bush family personified that and lived that, just like the Cobb does.
Right. So there are a lot of them. I could do more. But
thank you, Debbie. Great question.
That's so beautiful. So we have a question from Jill, and she asks, what qualities, if you could name a few, make you successful in life?
Well, hi, Jill. People can be successful in different ways. That's one thing to understand immediately. Success in one area isn't necessarily the same as success in another area. As I think Ileana mentioned, I grew up on a small farm in Southern California, and we did not have much in the way of resources except what we could raise or grow. And from that, I learned that every day you had to work. While we were on the farm, my brother and I worked on the farm. And every day you had to do your homework. That was a requirement of my parents. So by the time I was 17 and went off to Stanford, I didn't even know where it was, by the way, but when I went to Stanford, I had learned discipline. I had learned discipline of myself. I had learned the importance of work and the importance of education. So never have I stopped trying to educate myself in areas where I'm weak. Well, there are a lot of those, so I can go on my whole life educating myself. But those are qualities that really help you be successful. And then I'll just mention one human quality. One of the last quotes I have in the book is be kind, because everybody's fighting a big battle. You don't know what everybody's battle is. And being kind, it helps you towards success.
That is so beautiful. Thank you. And these things just remind me of the Dalai Lama. And I know that we're connected here because of Everest, because of Ileana's work on behalf of Tibet. And basically, he always says, be selfishly unselfish. The best feeling in the world. So here is a quote, actually a comment from Harriet Carter. She says, what an outstanding life you have had, Sue Cobb. What haven't you done that you still would like to do? God bless you and your dear husband. Thank you to Books and Books and Ileana.
Well, thank you, Harriet. That's really nice. Yeah, again, it's one of those things that I somehow or other I'm not a good planner ahead of time, but I don't have a wish list to go do things, but I do what I hope is in the life ahead of me. What I hope is the ability to stay close with my grandchildren. That's extremely important to me, and fortunately, they seem amenable to that. We have traveled a couple of times around the world with all 7 grandchildren and the parents. I'm really not looking for that kind of adventure now. If I can contribute a little bit in Washington, when we talk, Ileana and I and others, we talk about the needs of our country, because I've had a long exposure to those subjects. I hope I can do that. But I'm just here behaving myself, except for my bicycle hitting the arm rail last week, falling off my bike.
So we're gonna do 2 more questions. Here's one from Ada Ortuzar Young. Regardless of the advancement of women, men still dominate outside the home. It is still a man's world. How do you handle working and succeeding in a predominantly man's world? And I think you should both answer this one.
Good. Well, let me just say that I do a little bit address this in the book. And the fact is, I like working with men. I like men. I like being with them. I like working with them. I don't care who's boss as long as we get the job done. I know we have a ways to go on the women's front, and I'm for that. But, talk about balance. There has to be balance between men and women. And I don't have a solution. I think the progress has been, you probably weren't born in the 30s or 40s, so you can't have seen everything I've seen. So I do know that there's progress, and hopefully that continues. Ileana?
Well, yeah, I agree. And when you read Sue's book, I mean, you really get a sense of what it was like for women back then in the not so distant past. I mean, Sue lived it, and few women going to law school, and few women here, few women there. So we've come far, but we've got a long ways to go. Now, I served in kind of an all boys network there in Congress, but boy, things have changed. Women, the number of women serving in Congress now has gone up substantially, in the House and in the Senate. So things are moving in the right direction. But you are so correct. I think her name was Ida. We've got a long ways to go, but things are getting better. And in Sue's life, she's had a long and happy life. We've seen the progress of women, and I know that in her grandchildren's lives, boy, they're going to go far. So
they pay attention. They really pay attention. It's quite a lot different when I was dating Chuck Cobb at Stanford.
So we'll end with a very books and books type question from Linda. What are you both reading lately that inspires you?
I'll tell you, I have it right here. Let me see. It's holding up my laptop, and it says, "When Rabbis Blessed Congress, the Great American Story of Jewish Prayers on Capitol Hill." I just got it the other day from Howard Mortman, so that's what I'm reading. My hair.
I can't say that, I really can't say that this is exactly inspiring, maybe expiring. But I had never read Anna Karenina. And somebody said, how could you not have read that in your entire life? So recently I finished reading that, and then I read Peter the Great. And I was fascinated by those because it tells me where Russian history has come from and the influence on the current rulers of that country. So that's what I've been reading, but I have a pretty broad scope of reading material, though I don't get much time to read. I love to read.
Well, we love that. So one more comment from Linda Gassenheimer. Thank you both for being such wonderful role models for today's young women.
Oh, Linda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank both
for
of you
helping with all of the technology too.
Oh my gosh.
You're better at it than I am, but you guided me and you calmed me down that this is going to work.
We did it. We did it. So
Yay.
I just want to thank you both. I am floored by your accomplishments. I have nothing but admiration for both of you. Incredible lives, incredible spirits, incredible people. Keep doing whatever you're doing.
Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to remind everyone watching from everywhere that you can order the book if you haven't already by just pressing the green button at the bottom of the screen. We'll ship it right off to you, or you can come by any one of our stores for curbside pickup or safe distance, socially distanced shopping. And I want to thank everyone for watching and joining us in our little virtual bookshop. And I hope that we will get to see each other in person very, very soon.
Thanks, friends. Ileana.
I'm sure that Sue will be going deep sea diving this afternoon, and I'll be going through the drive-through.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.